Start with though is to just kind of review what we did on Wednesday because we covered a lot of ground with Flask and just kind of getting it set up and seeing how it works. So let me pull up the code that we wrote and let's just kind of go through this line by line. So Jessica, can you tell me what's happening on line 1 here?
You're importing Flask from Flask.
Okay. So from the Flask library, I'm importing the Flask class, and then some other things, right? This render template function, request, and then redirect, right? So this is functionality that we want to bring in from the Flask library. Cool. Next, line, yes. Sorry.
So the import, so you call it a class, but we also call modules.
What was the second thing you said?
The modules.
Models?
Modules.
Modules. Okay. Yeah, no, we're just importing specific things from the Flask library. Okay. So I mean, there are other ways of importing. I could just say import Flask, for instance. If I just did import lowercase Flask, that means that I'm importing the entire library. Okay.
I remember I read something from the learning platform about the modules. I'm not sure if that's the same thing.
Well, so yeah, the Flask is essentially a module, so to speak, right? But it's a library that somebody else has written for us. Yeah. Okay, cool. So let's get to line 3 here. See, something's kind of covering that up. Let me go to the left. Mike, what's happening on line 3?
Line 3, I think you're creating an object called app.
Okay.
Calling the Flask class.
Okay. So when we're calling a class like that, so to speak, what's happening there?
It's like kind of like creating a new node or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And the app has all the properties of Flask class.
Yeah, so we're using the Flask class, which again is our blueprint, going back to the OOP, and then we're creating an actual instance of that class, right? So I'm saying I'm creating this variable called app, and I'm assigning it to the result of creating a new instance of the Flask class. And then I'm passing in this globally available variable called dunder name, right? Do you guys remember what dunder name returns if I'm running this file directly?
Dunder main.
It returns dunder main. If I was importing this file from somewhere else, then it should return the name of this file, server.py, right? Okay, cool. Great. Next, line 5. Andrew.
It's just a declaration the app the route means like when you put the parameters, it will go through that route.
Okay.
Let's say, for example, it's going to be the users, and the method is just like the web page will also get the information from that web page.
Okay. So again, the decorator means that the very next function that comes right after this is going to have some special powers. Okay? And when I decorate it, I'm saying I want this route, so / users, I want it to accept some different methods here. So with the methods argument, we have to pass in a list, and I'm saying this can accept both post requests and get requests, right? Cool. All right, next.
Oh, question.
Yes.
Can you just, instead of putting the get, just put post instead, so it's be the same? If you just take out the get and that method.
Yeah. So if I take out the get, that means that we won't be able to process get requests at this route right here.
Oh.
And that would be fine, because I think I was just showing you guys that we could also have get requests here at this route as well. But really, we're only going to use the post request anyway. So yeah, that's cool. All right, next. Give me this whole function here, Melanie, line 6.
It's a little bit bigger.
Is it? Do you need me to make it a little bigger?
6.
How's that? Dang it.
So you're defining a method called process that
Okay, so it's just a function because we're not inside of a class, right? It's not really a method.
Then you're defining something about the process. Then you're going to print head. Let's see.
So
okay.
these are new line characters.
Then you're saving it with your new
Yeah.
character.
Bunch of new line characters.
Then request form first name. Okay, so then from the request form, you're going to do the value first name. So whatever first name is from request form, you index. And then next you're going to be returning a value. Oh, so in your function, you're going to be returning a value redirect. What is redirect?
So this means we're calling another function, right? You see how
okay.
we've now imported this redirect function from the Flask library,
Okay.
and then I'm invoking that function here. I'm invoking it with just a /,
Okay.
meaning that I want to redirect the user of my app just back to the index page. Make sense? Excellent. All right, let's keep going. Line 10. Stefan.
So basically, you're just rerouting again on that, like that slash thing.
Okay. So
So
this
it-
would be called the index route.
Oh yeah, the index user is just like on that slash we're trying to do something like sorry.
So what's happening here is we're using this decorator here, and that's saying that I want this route to be handled by whatever function comes right after it. Okay. Now, since we didn't specify that methods argument there, it's only going to take get requests by default. Okay. So we really only need to use this methods argument if we're going to provide something other than post, or I'm sorry, other than get. Because if it's just a get request, I don't have to specify that at all. All right, cool. Next, the index function, Nick.
So you're finding the index and creating a new user? Is that what you're doing?
So I'm creating a variable called user_list.
List, oh, okay, list. And then inside of the list, you're obviously assigning.
So what kinds of things have I put inside of my list? What kind of data structure is that?
Values?
You see these curly braces here?
Yeah, I honestly can't see that. So
Oh, you can't see it. Okay, so we've got curly braces that are surrounding this first name, last name, email.
okay.
These key value pairs, right? So what do we call this when we got a collection of key value pairs?
I don't know.
Anyone want to help Nick out? Dictionary, right? So it's just a collection of key value pairs. All right, cool. So we've created this list of users. Now we get down here to line 25. What are we doing there?
So you return a render template.
Ah,
The function.
we've invoked a function again, right? Because you can see we've got these parens here saying we're invoking this function. All right.
Correct. And then the parameters for that function, the arguments rather, requires an HTML file and then requires the dictionary that you just created. Oh, so are you declaring the name of user.list in your argument? Or are you calling it? You're like saying user list will be referred to as users.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. So again, the first argument is just the name of the file that we want to render, the actual template. And then I can have as many other arguments as I want, and basically these are just things that I'm going to have access to inside my template. So inside the template, I'm going to have access to this variable called users. The value of that will be this user list that I just created right there.
Okay.
Okay.
And that's the same thing that we saw in the previous demo where it's like you use your HTML to have like placeholder value variables for the dictionary variables so that they can plug in depending.
Yeah, exactly. So inside the template, it's kind of like we're substituting values in. When that template gets rendered, I want this to be replaced by whatever its actual
Okay,
value
so
is.
within indexation, we'll put like a corresponding
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. All right, excellent. We're almost there. Line 27. Who's back there in the back? Yeah, Ashton. All right. I found you. What's it? So what's happening on line 27?
Oh, yeah. Well,
Can you see that okay?
If name equals name, right?
Right.
Okay. If their name equals like
Their name. Whose name?
the user. No.
No, remember, what does this variable dunder name return?
The file. The file.
Yeah, if we're running the file directly, it's going to return _main _. Okay. However, if we were importing it from some other file, it would return the name of the file, so server.py. So all we're checking here is we're basically asking, are we running this file directly? And if we are, what do we want to do in here on line 28? Yeah, so we have this app object that we created, and the object has a method called run that we're now invoking, right? So we're invoking that, and we're saying we want the port number to be 3000, and then we want the debug to be equal to true. Do you guys remember what the debug is doing for us?
Debug allows you to. Is that like where you can run like tests, but it's like a specific syntax? Or no, maybe that's a different. No, actually, I couldn't recall.
Okay.
But it's similar to the VS Code debug, correct?
So, well, what setting debug to true does is that it basically allows the code to completely stop and restart every time we make a change to it. I mean, that's the big thing.
Oh.
So that way I don't have to manually stop my server, then start it again. It's automatically doing that as I make changes. The other thing, too, is that it's going to kind of show you which routes are being hit at all times. So if I make a GET request to my index route, it will actually show me that in my terminal. So pretty nice. All right, cool. So we've gone through our code. Let's actually load this back up. So there's one key thing that I need to do every time I'm going to run my projects. You guys remember what that is?
Virtual environment.
I need to activate my virtual environment, right? Now this time I've created the virtual environment right here in the folder. So I'm going to say source env/bin/activate. Okay, great. And now I'm just going to say Python server.py. Great. Now our server's running, and you can see it's telling us I can get it at this port 3000, right? All right, excellent. So today what we're going to talk about is this concept called session. Now thus far in our Flask studies, every single request has sort of existed on its own. It has no connection to any requests that came before it or any requests that are going to come after it. Now, if I have a user who's using my application, we may actually want to track some information about that user, right? Can you guys give me some ideas of things we might want to keep track of for a user? If we have, let's say we had an e-commerce app. What do you think we'd want to keep track of?
The name and email.
Yeah.
Cart.
Amount of time on the site.
The cart, I heard the cart over here. That's very important, right? I need to know that if a person adds an item to his or her cart, and then we go to another page, I still know the contents of that cart, right? Very important. Especially when we get to checkout. If I've lost all the items in the cart, well, I've lost that sale, basically, right? Okay, what were some other things you guys were saying?
Time spent on site.
Okay, maybe.
Which pages was it?
Yeah, maybe we want to keep track of that. Maybe we're trying to do some pretty intense analytics with our application to just know, like,
Yeah.
when do people, how quickly do people drop off or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Bounce rate. Yeah, exactly. All right. What's another thing we might want to know about somebody?
The location.
Yeah, that's a good one actually too. Like let's say we had some sort of a weather application. Somebody just starts using the application. I don't know where he or her is. I can maybe take some form input from that user. What zip code are you in? Okay. So if I store that information in the session, the zip code, that means that when that user gets to the next page of my application, I still have access to this information. It hasn't vanished. It's not gone, right? So that's what session gives us. It basically gives us some persistent information that we'll be able to have access to on subsequent requests. Now, a session doesn't last forever. However, as long as that session is active, we should be able to have access to these values. All right. So let's talk about how we can actually implement this in Flask. If I go up here, in addition to these things that we were already importing, we're also going to want to import session itself. This will allow us to use it in our application. So I'll add this to our imports. Whoa. Okay. Now, the other thing that I want to do is, in order to use session with Flask, we have to set what's called a secret key. And I'm going to do it down here. So I'm going to say app.secretKey, and then I'll just set it to some very secret key.
Do you really need to put this some very secret key or you just?
Well, you have to put something.
Oh.
And what's going to happen is if you fail to specify a secret key, it's going to tell you, it's going to throw an error and say you can't use session because you haven't set this secret key. Right? Okay. Now, inside my different functions that I'm using to handle these routes, I can actually use this session. And all session is, I want you guys to think of it as essentially just a dictionary. Okay? It's a dictionary that I'm going to have access to in all of my handler functions. So let's see how we can use it. So on my index route, let's say I want to have this thing inside my session. It's just going to be called last added user. Because before we had created this form where we were going to allow a person to submit a new user, right? And it was something like first name, last name, and email. And I'm going to say, let's say a person's using my application for the very first time. Okay, they've never accessed any of these pages yet. I'm going to ask a question here, and I'm going to ask, does this particular key exist in my session currently? So I can say something like this. If last added user, and then I can say not in session. So what that means is that if I don't have this key in my session dictionary, I'm going to want to add it to my session. Okay? So if that's true, I'm going to say session, and then I can say last added user inside brackets. So this means I want to set this particular key inside my session dictionary, and I'm just going to set it equal to none. Okay? So if that key doesn't exist in my session dictionary, I want that key to have a value of none. Now, how can we actually use this inside of our template? Well, a couple different ways. One, you should be able to access it using this session variable inside your template, or we can pass it explicitly. I'm going to pass it explicitly just to make it like really clear what's going on here. So in addition to passing our users, let's add another argument there. We're going to say last added user. And I'm going to set that equal to session and then at the last added user key. Okay, so what this is saying is that inside my template, I'm now have access to this thing called last added user. and I've set it equal to my session dictionary, that particular key called last added user. So what's the value going to be when I first load up this page? I've never used the app before.
It'll be, never used the app before?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you're the one,
It's going to be none because we have this little conditional up here. If it's not yet in there, I'm just going to set it to none. All right. So let's go into our template and see if we can do something with that. So here, inside of our index, I'll just put down above our table. I'm going to put a little conditional in here. So I'm going to say, if this last added user is not none, then I want to actually print out some details about that last added user, right?
Morley, does it matter where we put it in our template? Does it always have to go right above the table?
No, absolutely not. That kind of depends on what the assignment is or what the wireframe is asking for. No, the placement is totally up to you. Yeah. So here's what I'm saying. If last added user is not none.
How did you do that?
you have like an auto thing that changes.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Is that a plugin?
How do you,
So I've installed a special font
Oh, that's
called Fira code, and then you also have to make a change in your VS Code settings. So I'll post that up in Mattermost for you guys if you're interested in doing it.
so if we
Yeah.
don't have that, we're just basically saying
So if you didn't have it, it would just look like an exclamation point with an equal sign next to it. Yep. All right, and then I need to end this conditional down here, right? So we'll say end if. And then in here, I'm just going to do some p tags. So we'll do p. Actually, let me do a little heading here. So we'll do h2 last added user. Okay, and then inside that p tag, I'm going to say last added user. And then I want that added user's first name. But what am I doing wrong here? Did anyone catch?
You need to put the double curly.
I need to actually use double curly braces to make this output to the template, right? Otherwise, it's just going to show up this way, literally.
Oh.
And I want some substitution to happen here. So I go like that. What's that?
Double mustache.
Double mustache, yeah. And then let's duplicate that a couple times because we also want the last name and the email, right? Oops. Ah. All right, so replace that guy there. Now our server should still be running. Let me double check here. Yeah, we restarted. Good. So let's open it up and see what we got. So localhost 3000. Okay. So I don't have a last added user yet, right? Because I haven't actually. Remember, when we first hit the page, we should be showing none because this is the first time we're visiting the app, right? So how can I make some changes to that? If I go in here inside my server.py, let's do it inside here, right? So when we submit the form, let's just set the last added user to be whatever came through the form, all right? So the way that we can do that is we can say session. Actually, I'll just comment out our print there. Session. And then I want the last added user. I'm going to want it to be what kind of data structure? Does anyone know?
It's a dictionary.
It's going to be a dictionary. Yeah, exactly. Very good. Cool. So open up some curly braces. We'll say first name. And then I'm going to set that to request dot form first name. All right. We'll say last name. Same thing. Request dot form last name. Finally, email. Request.form email. Okay, and then everything else stays the same. So after I've assigned this key inside my session dictionary, I'm just redirecting back to the index page.
Quick question.
Yes.
I might have missed it. Why did you pick? Why are you putting session in that route? Why there? Why not at the index?
Because
Oh, because the
this
function
is where I'm processing my form submission.
Yeah, I just realized that. Okay.
Any other questions about kind of what we're doing here? So all I'm saying is I want this particular key inside my session to be equal to this new dictionary that I'm creating, right? Cool. All right, let's try it out. So let's try to submit a new user. I'll submit Stefan Belisario.
Yes.
Okay, cool. s@b.com. And there we go. So we submitted it, and then we came right back to the index page. This time, my last added user was not known, right? So it actually printed out some details about stuff. Okay. Now, let's talk about where this is being stored, because you guys might be wondering, I don't really understand how this whole session thing works, right? Well, it turns out that we're using a cookie in our browser to actually keep track of this specific user of the application. So when I access it on my computer, I'm being given a cookie by the server which identifies me specifically as this user. So that way, as I go to other pages in the application, the server's still going to know you're that user, right? It's not going to confuse me with Jessica or something like that. All right? So let's take a quick look at these cookies here. If I go to the Application tab and we go to Cookies, you'll see that I've got this. Actually, let me just clear this real quick and we'll refresh it. Okay, so no last added user right now. But notice how here I've got this session cookie right here. And it's got a value there. So that's how Flask is keeping track of me through this cookie. Okay? That's what we're doing when we're working with the session. We're keeping some persistent data here inside the application so that I know who this person is as they hit other routes in the application. What if I wanted to be able to completely reset the session? So let me just set this last added user one more time. Oops. Steven. Sorry. Yes. Okay. So again, we've got this last added user here, Stefan. Now, I want to be able to clear the session and basically make it go away as if I'm a brand new user. I haven't used this app before. Yeah, I mean, I could clear it from the browser. You're right. So if I went in here and just went like that and refreshed the page, you can see the last added user is gone because I forcefully cleared the cookie from the browser. But what if I want to do it from the actual application? So what I can do is I can create another route in my application that would essentially reset the session for me. Okay? So let's create that real quick. Let's go back to our server.py and I'll create a new route. I'll just say it's /reset, and then we'll call this function reset. So inside this reset function, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clear the session. I'm going to say session.clear. And what does this mean when we see the parentheses like this? We're invoking this clear function. Okay? Now the next thing I want to do is just basically redirect back to the index. So we'll say return redirect, and then I'll pass in that /, meaning I want to go back to that index route. Cool. So we've got Stefan in the session. Let me refresh it here. Now, what if I go to this /reset route? Hey, what happened? I cleared my session, and then I redirected right back to this page.
Can I see the code?
Certainly. So all we did there is we just created this new route, which is /reset, and then the function that goes with that, inside the body of that function, I'm going to invoke session.clear. All right, and that means whenever the person visits the next page, it'll be as if that person hasn't used this app before. It's sort of a fresh session. We've cleared out all the data that was inside that session dictionary. And then I just redirected back to the index route. Okay. So that's it. That's the whole session demo. Do you guys have any questions about how session works? Let's have some thumbs on this. Good there? It's what? Foggy.
Yeah.
All right, so sideways maybe? Andrew? Only sideways? So sideways back here.
Just because I haven't gotten the class, so it doesn't have to do with this.
Alright, ooh. It's a rough day.
Yeah.
Alright, let's see the top here. Yeah, and then let me close this guy out a little bit.
Some very secret key.
Very secret.
So that app.secret key doesn't the string attached doesn't have to be
Yeah, it's just a value. It's going to use this value to basically hash the session token. But it's not very critical what you set this to. You just have to set that to something. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so again, what kind of data structure is session? It's a dictionary, right? Okay. So if I want to start things from scratch, if I want to say I want to clear out everything that was inside session, again, we've got this little function that we can run. Whoops, I went too far. We've got this function that we can run called clear. I want to clear the session. Just empty out all the keys and values that are inside of it right now. Now the other key thing to understand too is how to set key value pairs inside that session dictionary. And that's what we're doing inside here. So we're saying session, and then in brackets, what key do I want to assign a value? I want to assign it to this value. I want to assign it to none. Okay?
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Marley.
No, it's
For
good.
session, we're always gonna set it equal to none.
No, and again, I'm not setting the whole session to none.
Just the last added
I'm just setting that specific
Right,
key
the last
inside the
entry.
session dictionary to none.
to none.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, not necessarily. I mean, what if it was something else? If I was trying to keep, like in Ninja Gold, for instance, you guys are going to keep track of how much gold a user has. Okay? So if I get a first-time player who's never played this game, I'd probably want to set his or her gold to 0. Brand new player, right? So it won't necessarily always be none. It kind of depends on the circumstances of what you're doing. Or if I had, the other thing that you guys will see in Ninja Gold is that there's going to be a list of activities that have happened in the game. So if I have a brand new player who's never played this game before, what would I set that player's list of activities to?
0 or 2 to
It
none.
would just be an empty list,
Oh, okay.
right? Because that player hasn't done any activities in the game yet. Yeah, so that'll all make a little bit more sense once you guys get to the Ninja Gold assignment. But let's try to push. If you're not in Flask yet, let's try to get there as soon as possible. Because all of a sudden we're going to be in Django before you know it.
Is the Django similar to Flask?
Yeah, there are going to be some similarities that we see with Django. Django is a little bit more involved in the setup process. It's a little bit more complex, but in terms of the way that things work, there are a lot of similarities. Yep.
You can do a lot more Django than you can.
Yeah, I mean, it also comes with more features. It gives us more bells and whistles.
So, were you guys teaching us Flask as like a fundamental kind of thing?
Yeah, Flask is kind of like, let's get our feet wet with a server-side framework and just kind of see how to render out some routes and use templating.
So the Django is like the same exact thing as Flask, but with more features, but in different syntax.
Yeah, and again, it's not, whereas Flask is more of a micro framework, Django is more of a full-featured framework. So Flask just is not super opinionated how you structure things. We can kind of put everything all into one file. With Django, we're gonna be a little bit more modular with it. So we'll have different files for our routing than we do for our actual function logic. Right? It'll be a little different, but yeah, conceptually a lot of these things are very similar. So you guys will for sure notice some of those similarities. And that's the point too. It's like, okay, well, we're going from here to here, but it's not like it's a completely different ball game. It's just we're shifting gears a little bit, right? All right, cool. One announcement too. Again, if you guys are in the on-ramp program, make sure to show up to the 12:30 video lecture. Okay? All right, off to work, guys.